It's strange how driving at night changes everything. How the same roads you travel during the day start to feel unfamiliar, quieter, almost distant, as if the world itself has slowed down and left only a few people moving through it. And for rideshare drivers, those late night hours often bring encounters that don't feel entirely normal. Because when you pick up a passenger, you don't know who they are, where they've been, or what kind of situation they're coming from. You just open the door, start the ride, and trust that everything will be fine. Most nights, that's exactly what happens. But sometimes, something feels off, something small at first, something easy to ignore, until it slowly becomes impossible to explain. Tonight, I'm going to share 3 disturbing stories from Uber drivers, moments that started like any other ride and turned into something they still think about long after the trip ended. The first story comes from a driver who had been working late shifts for over a year, someone who was already used to quiet roads, random passengers, and the occasional uncomfortable situation. But nothing had ever truly unsettled him until one night. It was around 2:40 a.m. when he received a ride request from a location just outside the city, an area that was mostly empty at that hour, with only a few scattered buildings and long stretches of dark road in between. At first, he almost ignored the request, thinking it might be a mistake. But since he was nearby, he accepted it and started driving towards the pickup point. As he got closer, he noticed something strange. The GPS showed the location clearly, but there were no lights, no movement, nothing that suggested anyone was actually there. Still, he slowed down and pulled up to the exact spot marked on the map. For a few seconds, nothing happened. He checked his phone again, confirming the pickup, and just as he was about to cancel the ride, the rear passenger door slowly opened. He hadn't seen anyone approach the car. He hadn't heard footsteps. And yet, the door opened. He turned slightly, looking into the back seat through the mirror, but the lighting was too dim to see clearly. Then the door closed. The ride had started. He glanced at the app and the destination was already set. A location about 20 minutes away, deeper into a part of the city that he wasn't very familiar with. Trying not to overthink it, he started driving. For the first few minutes, everything felt normal, quiet, but not unusual. The passenger didn't speak, which wasn't uncommon for late-night rides, and the driver didn't ask any questions. But after a while, something began to feel off. He checked the rear-view mirror again, expecting to see at least a silhouette, some kind of movement. But the back seat looked darker than it should have. Not empty, just unclear. He adjusted the mirror slightly, trying to get a better angle. But the moment he did, he felt something shift. Not a sound, not a clear movement, just a subtle change in the space behind him, like something had leaned slightly closer. His grip tightened on the steering wheel, but he didn't turn around. He told himself it was just his imagination, just the low light playing tricks on his eyes. A few more minutes passed in silence, and then suddenly, the passenger spoke. A quiet voice, calm, close, much closer than it should have been. It said his name. The driver froze for a second, his heart skipping, because he hadn't told the passenger his name. It wasn't displayed anywhere inside the car. He swallowed, trying to stay composed, and asked how they knew his name, but there was no response. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. He looked at the mirror again, and this time, For a brief moment, he thought he saw something. Not clearly, not enough to describe. Just a shape, slightly darker than the rest of the back seat, positioned in a way that didn't feel right. Then it was gone. He blinked, focusing on the road, telling himself to just finish the ride and not think about it. But then, the voice came again, this time softer, almost like a whisper. It told him to take a different route, not the one on the GPS. He hesitated, his instincts telling him not to listen. But something about the tone of the voice made it hard to ignore, calm, controlled, as if it wasn't a suggestion. It was an instruction. He followed it. The road it led him onto was darker, quieter, with fewer street lights and no other cars in sight. The kind of road that felt isolated even in the middle of the city. As he drove further, the feeling in the car changed. The air felt colder, the silence heavier, and the presence behind him felt closer, like it wasn't sitting back anymore, like it was leaning forward, watching. Then suddenly, the GPS recalculated on its own. The destination changed, not slightly, completely. The new location was no longer a street or a building. It was just a blank point on the map. No name, no details, just an empty marker. His heart started racing now, and without thinking, he slowed the car down. The moment he did, the voice spoke again. Louder this time, more direct, telling him not to stop. That's when he made a decision. He ignored the instruction, pulled the car over, and turned around quickly, finally looking into the back seat. It was empty. Completely empty. No one there, no sign that anyone had ever been inside. The door hadn't opened. The app still showed the ride as active. His breathing became uneven as he looked back at his phone. And then, the ride ended on its own. No payment, no history, no record of the passenger, just gone. He drove away immediately, not stopping, until he reached a well-lit area. His hands still shaking as he tried to process what had just happened. He checked his app again and again, but there was nothing. No trip history, no request, nothing to prove that the ride had ever existed. He quit driving late nights after that, and to this day, he refuses to pick up passengers from isolated locations because a part of him still believes that whatever got into his car that night wasn't just a passenger. It was something that knew exactly how to get in. And more importantly, how to disappear without leaving any trace behind. The second story comes from an Uber driver who had been working the late shift for several months, someone who had already dealt with difficult passengers, awkward conversations, and the occasional uncomfortable situation. But nothing that truly made him feel unsafe. Until one particular night. It was around 1:55 a.m. when he received a ride request from a residential area not too far from where he was. A quiet neighborhood with long, empty streets and dim streetlights that barely lit the sidewalks. The pickup location seemed normal, just a small house at the end of the street. So he accepted the ride and made his way there. When he arrived, the street was completely silent. No people outside, no movement, just a single porch light glowing faintly near the house. He slowed down and parked in front, checking the app to confirm the pickup. And just as he was about to send the usual "I've arrived" message, the front door of the house slowly opened. A woman stepped out. At first glance, nothing about her seemed unusual. She walked calmly toward the car, her movements slow but steady, and opened the back door before getting inside without saying a word. The driver greeted her politely, but she didn't respond. He assumed she might be tired or just not in the mood to talk, which wasn't uncommon, so he started the ride and began driving toward the destination shown on the app. For the first few minutes, everything felt normal. The road was empty, the car was quiet, and the only sound was the low hum of the engine. But then, after a short while, he noticed something in the rearview mirror that made him uneasy. The woman wasn't sitting back normally. She was leaning slightly forward. Not enough to be obvious, but enough to feel wrong. Her face was partially hidden in shadow, but her eyes were visible, and they weren't looking out the window. They were fixed on him. He quickly looked back at the road, telling himself not to overreact. But the feeling didn't go away. A few seconds later, he checked the mirror again, and she hadn't moved. Still leaning forward, still staring, not blinking, not shifting, just watching. A quiet tension began to build in the car, something that made the air feel heavier, the silence more uncomfortable. He cleared his throat slightly, trying to break the tension, and asked if the temperature in the car was okay. No response, just silence. He adjusted the mirror again, pretending it was for visibility, but really, just trying to change the angle so he wouldn't have to look directly at her. But even then, he could still feel it, that constant sense of being watched. Minutes passed like that, the silence stretching longer than it should, until suddenly, she spoke. Her voice was soft, calm, but something about it felt off. Not threatening, not aggressive, just empty. She asked him if he had ever taken this route before. He hesitated for a second, then answered honestly, saying that he had driven through the area a few times. There was a pause. Then she spoke again. She told him to take a different road, one that wasn't on the GPS. He glanced at the map briefly, then back at the road, unsure of what to do. Normally, he wouldn't change the road unless there was a clear reason. But something about the way she said it made it feel less like a request and more like an expectation. Against his better judgment, he followed her direction. The new road was darker, narrower, with fewer streetlights and no houses in sight. The kind of road that felt isolated, cut off from everything else. As he drove further, the atmosphere in the car shifted again. The temperature felt colder, the silence heavier, and the presence behind him felt even closer. Then suddenly, he noticed something else. The GPS had stopped updating. The route line froze. The map itself didn't move, even though the car clearly was. He tapped the screen lightly, thinking it might be a glitch, but nothing changed. At that exact moment, the woman leaned closer. This time, there was no subtlety. He could see it clearly in the mirror. Her face was closer now, much closer, and her eyes, still locked on him. Then she spoke again. But this time, her voice didn't sound the same. It was lower, slower, almost layered, like there was more than one tone underneath it. She quietly told him, "You shouldn't have come this way." His heart started pounding instantly. Without thinking, he pressed the brakes slightly, slowing the car down. His mind racing, trying to decide what to do next. But before he could react further, everything changed. The GPS screen went completely blank. The interior lights flickered once, and for a brief second, the reflection in the rearview mirror didn't match what he expected to see. He didn't fully understand it in the moment, but something about the shape behind him looked wrong. Not just her position, but her form. It wasn't clear. It wasn't stable, like it wasn't meant to be seen directly. Panic took over. He didn't ask questions. He didn't wait. He immediately turned the steering wheel, making a sharp turn back towards the main road, ignoring whatever directions she had given him. The car sped up, the engine louder now, the tires hitting uneven parts of the road as he pushed forward. And then, silence. Not normal silence. Complete silence. The kind that feels sudden and unnatural. He risked a glance in the mirror. The back seat was empty. Completely empty. No door had opened. No sound had been made. She was just gone. His breathing became heavy as he kept driving, not slowing down until he reached a well-lit road with other cars in sight. Only then did he finally stop, pulling over and turning around fully to check the back seat again. Nothing. No one. Just the empty interior of his car. His hands were shaking as he looked down at his phone. And that's when he noticed something that made it even worse. The ride was still active. The passenger was still listed. But the pickup location had changed. It no longer showed the house where he had picked her up. Instead, it showed a completely different place. A location miles away. A place he had never been to. He ended the ride immediately, not caring about anything else, and drove home without accepting another request that night. The next day he checked the trip history, hoping to find some explanation, some detail that would make sense of what happened. But the record of that ride was incomplete. The start point was wrong. The route was missing, and the end location was blank. No address, no data, nothing. He stopped driving night shifts after that, and even now he avoids certain routes. Especially the one she told him to take, because a part of him still believes that whatever got into his car that night didn't just want a ride, it wanted to take him somewhere he wasn't supposed to come back from. The third story comes from an Uber driver who had been working night shifts for years. Someone who had seen almost everything that late-night driving could offer. From strange passengers to uncomfortable situations, but nothing that ever truly stayed with him. Until one ride that completely changed the way he looked at his job. It was around 3:30 a.m. when he received a request from a location near an old highway that ran along the edge of the city, an area that was known for being unusually quiet at night, with long stretches of road and very few buildings nearby. He almost declined the ride at first, mostly because it was far from his usual routes, but something made him accept it anyway. As he drove toward the pickup point, the streets became emptier, the lights fewer, until eventually he was surrounded by nothing but dark road and the occasional flicker of a distant street light. When he reached the location, he slowed down, scanning the area carefully. There was no one visible at first. No houses, no shops, just a narrow road stretching into darkness. He checked the app again to confirm the pickup spot, and just as he was about to cancel the ride, he saw someone standing on the side of the road. A man, completely still, facing away from the car. The driver hadn't noticed him before, even though he was close enough that he should have been visible. A slight unease settled in, but he pushed it aside and pulled over. The man didn't move immediately. For a few seconds, he just stood there, his back still turned, as if he hadn't realized the car had arrived. Then slowly, he turned around. The movement was unnatural. Not fast, not smooth, just slightly delayed, like it didn't match the moment. The driver felt a small chill, but unlocked the doors anyway. The man walked toward the car and got into the back seat without saying a word. The door closed. The ride began. The destination appeared on the app about 15 minutes away, back towards the city. Relieved that it wasn't further into isolation, the driver started driving. For the first few minutes, everything seemed normal. The road was empty, the car quiet, and the passenger remained silent. But then something began to feel wrong. The driver checked the rearview mirror casually, expecting to see the man sitting back normally. But instead, he noticed that the man was sitting too still, completely still, not shifting, not adjusting, not even blinking from what he could tell in the dim reflection. His posture was rigid, almost unnatural, as if he was holding himself in place. The driver looked away quickly, telling himself not to overthink it, but the feeling lingered. After a few more minutes, he checked the mirror again, and this time, the man was looking directly at him. Not just glancing, staring. His eyes fixed unblinking, following every movement the driver made. A quiet tension filled the car. The driver cleared his throat and asked the usual question, confirming the destination, trying to bring some normalcy into the situation. There was a pause. Then the man spoke. His voice was calm, low, but something about it felt distant, not emotional, not natural, just flat. He confirmed the destination, but then added something else. He told the driver that he had taken this ride before. The driver frowned slightly, confused, assuming he meant the route, and responded casually. But the man didn't clarify. The silence returned, heavier than before. A few seconds later, the driver noticed something on his phone. The route on the GPS had slightly changed. Not dramatically, just enough to be noticeable. He hadn't taken a wrong turn. The road was the same, but the estimated time and path looked different. He tapped the screen, thinking it might be recalculating, but the change didn't make sense. That's when the passenger spoke again. This time, his voice slightly closer. He said, "You missed the turn." The driver's grip tightened on the steering wheel. He was certain he hadn't. The GPS hadn't instructed any turn. Still, he slowed down slightly, glancing at the map again, unsure of what to believe. And then, the GPS glitched. The screen flickered briefly, and for a split second, the route disappeared completely. No map, no direction, just a blank screen. His heart rate picked up instantly. He tapped the phone again, trying to bring it back, and within a second, the map returned. But the route was different now, completely different. It showed a road he hadn't taken, a path that led somewhere else entirely. Before he could react, the passenger leaned forward slightly, close enough that the driver could feel his presence just behind his shoulder. And then he said something that made everything stop. He quietly said, "This is where it happened last time." The driver froze. His mind tried to process what that meant. But before he could ask anything, the car's interior lights flickered once, then again. The engine sound seemed to dull for a second, like the world around him had shifted slightly. And then, for a brief moment, something in the mirror didn't look right. The reflection behind him didn't match the seat. The shape wasn't clear, wasn't stable, like it was there and not there at the same time. Panic hit instantly. Without thinking, the driver pressed the accelerator, speeding up, ignoring the GPS, ignoring the passenger, focusing only on getting back to a main road. The car moved faster, the headlights cutting through the darkness as he pushed forward. And then suddenly, the passenger spoke again. But this time, the voice didn't sound like it was coming from the back seat. It sounded closer, much closer, almost right next to him. It said, "You didn't stop last time either." That was enough. The driver slammed the brakes hard, the car jerked into a stop in the middle of the empty road. He didn't think. He didn't hesitate. He immediately turned around, his heart pounding, his breath uneven. The back seat was empty, completely empty. No one there. No door opening, no sound, nothing. Just the empty seat staring back at him. His hands shook as he looked forward again, trying to steady himself, trying to understand what had just happened. And then he slowly looked down at his phone. The ride was still active, the passenger name still there, the destination still set. But the pickup time had changed. It no longer showed the current time. It showed a time from days ago, the same exact hour, the same location. His breathing stopped for a moment as the realization settled in. He wasn't just giving someone a ride. He had somehow connected to something that had already happened before, something that hadn't ended. He ended the ride immediately and drove away, not looking back, not stopping, until he reached a crowded area filled with lights and people. He never drove that route again. In fact, he stopped driving completely after a few days, unable to shake the feeling that the ride hadn't really ended, that whatever had been sitting in his car that night wasn't just a passenger. It was something repeating a moment, something stuck between places, waiting for someone to pick it up again. And the worst part was the thought that maybe he hadn't been the first driver to accept that request. And maybe he wouldn't be the last. And the most disturbing thing about all of these rides isn't just what the drivers experienced. It's the pattern behind them. Because in every single story, everything started normally. Just another ride request. Just another passenger. Just another quiet night on the road. And yet, in each case, something shifted in a way that couldn't be explained. A passenger appearing without being seen. A voice knowing things it shouldn't know. A ride that didn't follow normal routes or normal rules. 3 different drivers, 3 different nights, but the same feeling running through all of them. That quiet realization that something in the car with them wasn't just another person. And maybe that's what makes these stories so unsettling. Because rideshare driving is built on trust. You pick someone up without knowing who they are, where they've been, or what they might be carrying with them. And most of the time, the trust is never broken. But sometimes, something gets into the car that doesn't belong to that system, something that doesn't follow the same logic as everything else. And what's even harder to ignore is how similar the experiences feel. The silence, the stillness, the way the passenger doesn't behave normally, the way they seem to know more than they should, the way they guide the driver away from familiar roads into places that feel isolated, disconnected, almost separate from everything else. It makes you wonder if these encounters are random, or if they happen more often than anyone realizes. Because think about it. How many drivers are out there right now, accepting late-night rides, following GPS directions without question, trusting that every request is just another normal trip? And how many of those rides will feel completely fine until something small changes, something subtle, something that doesn't quite make sense? Maybe it's the way a passenger enters the car. Maybe it's the silence that feels heavier than it should. Or maybe it's just a single moment, a glance in the mirror that doesn't look quite right. And by the time that feeling becomes clear, it might already be too late to understand what's really happening. Because in all three of these stories, there's one detail that stands out more than anything else. Whatever was in the car didn't feel lost, didn't feel confused, didn't feel sluchino. It felt aware, calm, in control, as if it knew exactly what it was doing, exactly where it wanted to go, and exactly who it needed to get there. And maybe that's the thought that stays with these drivers the most. Not just what they saw or heard, but what it suggests, that these weren't just strange passengers. They were something else entirely. Something that uses moments like these, quiet nights, empty roads, isolated rides, to move unnoticed, to exist just long enough to reach wherever it needs to be. So the next time you book a ride late at night, or find yourself driving through an empty road with someone sitting behind you, take a moment and think about it. Not just about who's in the car with you, but about whether they were ever really supposed to be there in the first place. Because sometimes the most disturbing rides aren't the ones that go wrong. They're the ones that feel completely normal until you realize they never were.